Oh, greetings and salutations, Interdistance. This is Vortek, and here we are with another fun video, but this is something a bit different. Just as a little bit of a clarification, prior to the COOF lockdown, like the few years before that, I have been following Warhammer, 40K, and Age of Sigmar lore, fantasy lore, for several years prior to that, and I was getting more and more interested in it as a whole. It's something entirely different from what I usually deal with. It's more of a social kind of game. So in my old age, I've always been kind of like a person who's been really awkward at dealing with a lot of social stuff. So I kind of decided that I was going to get into more social gaming over the years. So one of the things I actually considered was, besides TTRPGs, which I got into several years ago, that Warhammer or other war games would also be a good option. So what happened was, like, running up to the lockdown, I bought some Warhammer stuff, and then I never really moved on from there. So I got some Warhammer stuff that I never really put together or anything, but I just want to like show off so you can see. These books are actually quite nice. They are approximately, this is getting started with Warhammer 40K. This is the 8th edition book. It has over 100 pages. There is one of these, this is the 8th edition version. There's also a 9th edition version of this book out, as well as a Age of Sigmar 3rd edition book. There used to be a 2nd edition book, but I think they sold out right around the time when I started buying these things. But anyways, what you get here is, this is roughly like $14.95 to $20. And what's nice is that you get this little guy right here. You get yourself a Space Marine. This is kind of nice. This is a really good starting point. If you go into this book, there's actually, in this book, instructions on assembling this Space Marine, as well as what tools you're going to need for assembling this Space Marine, and paint jobs and paint techniques. And what is really cool about this book, as I said, it's 100 pages. This is a nice, hard spine book. There's actually, it's a soft cover, but it's a firm square spine. You open up the book, it has amazing artwork of actual paint jobs they have done, with the whole collect, build, paint, and play e-model. How very much in line with Pokemon, you know, gotta catch them all. Catch, battle, and trade. You have this beautiful page that splashes open to the various sections, giving you a nice range of lore of Warhammer and Warhammer culture. Everything from the very first few pages, which is a taste of the lore of the universe, to the armies that you deal with in the universe, the community, battle for the bunker, general themes of Warhammer, showcase of all different miniatures from Citadel Miniatures, painting techniques, dice and getting ready for actual playing of game, core set rules. You got some basic core set rules that are included in this book. That's really nice. And then they have basic instructions right here, how to assemble this fellow right here. But as you can continue on, you have this beautiful 1.5 page splash of Ultramarines with Guilliman. Oh my goodness. So many people hate Guilliman in the Ultramarines, but I actually love them. Blue is actually one of my favorite colors, and gold. So here's a little taste of them fighting the Death Guard. For Warhammer 8th edition, the starter sets were basically Ultramarines versus Death Guard. You know, you get a lot of Ultramarines by default, which is probably the reason why so many people hate Ultramarines, is because Ultramarines are literally basically the default Marines you basically get in most starter sets. You get the Legions of Chaos, some Night Lord action in there, as well as a few other legions. You get the armies of Imperium. The Astra Militarum. You get the Titans. You get a touch of Assassins. You get the Eldar. You got the Orcs and the Necrons. The Necrons are actually in the starter set for 9th edition. You got the Tau Empire up here. The Tyranids. And the Gene Stealer cults. And it does this really nice job of giving you just tastes of everything. And then it goes into a bit more detail, where to start, collecting to play, collecting to display. So there's a whole other thing. There's people who really enjoy just assembling the miniatures and putting them up in a beautiful display, setting up backgrounds in battlefield debris across the field as their army marches over the corpses of their enemies, battling more enemies, you know, kind of thing. Warhammer is delightful for so many opportunities in artistic play. You get some more Ultramarines love. You got the Death Guard, which, as I said, in the 8th edition was Ultramarines versus Death Guard. In 9th edition, it's Ultramarines versus Necrons. Incidentally, I decided to go with Necrons when I got around to 9th edition, but I've yet to really get going into it. You got playing the game. You got basic options like open play, narrative play, matched play. Matched play operates on a point system, and so forth. Open play there's more details into that. There's whole ranges of channels here on YouTube, like Auspex Tactics and Tactical Tortoise and such like that. Those are like the two ones right off the bat I think of when I think of like 40K. Luton as well for lore. I've been following him for years. You got display. You got your battlefield. You got different types of terrain. Depending on the edition you play, there's various bonuses and rules relating to proximity to terrain, size of vehicles and such, it's bypassing terrain, and so forth. This whole book section right here starts out. This is actually this referred to as battle report, battle for the bunker, but it actually walks you through the deployment phase, gives you letter point examples of different things all over the field, and then it goes into turn 1. It shows you examples of various units in which you can employ in the battlefield, as well as your enemies' units, arrangements with around terrain and such. It walks you through the steps very nicely. Turn 2, turn 3 and 4, and so forth. And then it shows you off an advertisement for the boxes. This, by the way, is a box. Some of the boxes, actually, when you pull out the miniatures or the sprues, you have the inner liner box that you can flip over and use as a piece of terrain. So that is actually quite handy dandy. It shows you off some more Death Guard and affiliated components in it. Yeah, I know. I just brain farted over that. More Ultramarines love. You get some Adeptus Mechanicus. You got Space Wolves, Astra Militarum, Blood Angels. You got various different boxes here. They do a nice job of showing you off all kinds of displays and situations, as well as the different factions. A lot of Space Marines and a lot of Ultramarines and a lot of Death Guard is in here. But of course, that is just because that is the starting factions for 8th edition. We're currently on 9th edition. So there you go. You got some Khorne faction. You got different. You got some more units. You got Ultramarines. You got various other legions of Marines or chapters. You got some Eldar units, Craft World and such, as well as the other faction. I forget the name. It starts with a Y. I cannot pronounce it. I have enough issues pronouncing shit as it is. Diptus Mechanicus, Orcs. You know, Orcs sound like a ton of fun, but they're expensive. Tyranids, Gene Stealer Cults, Tau, some Chaos Group factions. You got the section on painting. Games Workshop has their own Citadel paint line. However, a lot of people claim that Army Painter and a few other companies are much better overall. However, people will admit that the metallics from Games Workshop is actually still pretty good. So, you know, expensive paint and pretty decent overall. But there's other paints out there that are a bit cheaper, but just as good or even slightly better for the similar price point. So trade-offs, different people. You know, I've actually had a lot of years painting back in high school and the few years after that and stuff like that. But this is something more new to me. I was painting vistas and fruits and seeing various found objects and stuff like that, and painting people was a thing I never really did, or miniatures or anything. I was always painting landscapes and stuff like that, or various other objects. So this is actually going to be something a similar line but different from what I'm used to. They show you proper techniques of thinning out your paint, a few different tricks for it, as well as shading. This is actually a really nice overall book. They explain the basic fundamentals of using different brush types for fine detail, how to do it quickly. The general rule when painting is you want to paint your background colors first, your bases, and then you work yourself into details. For stuff like this, for people who are shaky-handed, I would probably suggest is using a shield. Simple tip for, say, straight lines is that if you are painting an object and you don't want your paint on a object, but you want a straight line, is you want a thin piece of plastic that you let the lower paint dry, and then you use the straight edge of a piece of plastic, if it's flexible, and curve it as a shield. So you can actually take a very fine bristle of a short, somewhat stiff but fine bristle brush, and you could paint a straight line exactly. And that comes out quite nicely once you get that whole pattern down, because you can then just take that little piece and just move it around all the straight edges and then paint out all your fine details and straight edges, because you have a nice little handy dandy shield and you have a good brush for getting into those fine little grooves. It accidentally flipped back several pages. But anyways, yeah, that's a fun tip from me to you from my days from doing all kinds of painting. Not with Warhammer or miniatures or anything, but I use that for a lot of fine detail work on paintings. You have to be very careful whenever you paint something. You want just enough paint on the brush when you're doing fine details that you apply paint, but no more paint than what is necessary on the tip of the brush. Unless you're painting like large swaths, which you use a large brush, you want to go from your large brushes to your fine brushes to for your final details. So, I accidentally skipped a page. So you got your shading, your dry brushing technique. Dry brushing is essentially you just wipe out all your paint on a piece of paper, and you basically take the tip of the brush and just run it over. You just have residual, and you just apply as residual amounts to it. And it's good for putting really fine details or textures on surfaces. You got your dry brushing, your layering, your glazing. Now, for me, I never was a big fan of putting a glaze or a fine any kind of enamel or reflective surface on things. I always kind of liked the matted appearance on things. But everyone is different. When I worked in woodworking, I always went with natural finish as much as possible. I kind of like having texture on my things as much as possible. You got base work, painting your bases. People have suggested when it comes to Games Workshop base texture paints that they are on the expensive side and that are not something you really truly want to use. You want to use other brands. However, I have to go back and do some research on that to double check that. To double check what they suggest, I'm going to at least start with I'm going to start with Army Painter and Games Workshop and see where those land out. Technical paints. You got your intercessor right here. Boop, this guy right here. How to basically paint him and set him up. You got your Reaver. You got your Plague Marine, Poxwalker. Various stages of painting. You got your, as you see, they paint over pretty much the whole thing. If you make your paint thin enough, you could apply it all over the whole thing. Like, don't give a crap. You just just over the whole thing. Just really thin, just to get a very thin layer on. And then you can come back around and do all the details. If you try to purposefully, when doing fine detail work, avoid all the fine details, it'll take you even longer. The only problem with painting the whole thing over with one color and then painting another color on top and another color on top is you get sort of a thickening layering effect, and you have to pace yourself out more between doing the layers. But other than that, it's a fairly good technique. It would be nice if they were slightly larger in scale. But anyways, hey. Then there's extra steps to add more details on. So you got your perfectly fine for parade and play. And then you could go and add just a little more love to juice it up to make it really nice. Of course, I'm really rusty, so it's probably going to take me a while to get back to a decent level of painting skill. But that is a beautiful display right there. Quite frankly, that is far more terrain than what they suggest in the rules for combat. This is actually closer to a proper terrain arrangement with all the miniatures still tossed into it. This is just display. You got your data sheets explaining all your mechanics. You got a reference to a book. You got a section on describing core rules. Battle round table. This is handy dandy to study over. You got the basic explanation of the movement phase and basic rules on all that. The whole system runs on D6s. I got tons of D6s. the shooting phase, the charge phase, describing your basic instructions how to properly do a charge, the fight phase, so when your units get really close, you can make it up into contact zone and boom, you're in fight. You got a morale phase. You lose too many units, you have to roll for morale, and if you roll poorly, you lose units because they freak out and run out of battle. And then the final little section here, and the final diagram. If you are interested in Warhammer 40K or Age of Sigmar, my basic suggestion is that I've personally found doing research on this, the first and foremost, do what I do. Find some actual Warhammer channels. I suggested already Auspex Tactics and Tactical Tortoise and Luton. I forget there's a bunch of numbers attached to the back end of that. They are great channels to start watching. One is lore, the other two are mechanics and rules. And from following those channels, you can go through their the channel suggestions, and you could spider out from there, subscribe to more and more Warhammer 40K channels. You can also go and subscribe to, say, Cinderfall Games and Hey Whoa and a few others. They cover some other tabletop war games as well as Age of Sigmar. I do suggest subscribing to those as well, just so you can get some more texture in your experience. Go to their channels, watch the snot out of their stuff, get an idea, a rough idea of what kind of faction you're interested in based on how they describe how the faction plays and such. Don't worry about who is meta, because there's one simple truth in the meta, is that the meta is always rotating. If you're chasing the meta, you're going to burn a lot of money. The best route is to pick a faction that best jives with how you feel you want to play, and the faction that has basically, it looks like it's something that's in your skill range for painting, and you would be most interested in painting and playing with. Alright, so once you've figured out, you've subscribed to those channels, you've got an idea of what faction you want to play as, you go and pick up one of these books, and you read through them some more, because this is going to give you some more details on it. This is the 8th edition one. I got the 9th edition one, which actually has a whole bunch more in here. And I got the Age of Sigmar 3rd edition one. But these are actually fairly cheap. They give you the base rules. They give you the general setup of the game. So you can sit down, you could be listening to Auspex Tactics or Tactical Tortoise, Luton. Good grief, he has a skull for his icon, and he has like a really British accent, and he's really awesome. You can also listen to Arch. Arch is pretty good overall. But anyways, you can be listening to them, looking at the screen on your TV or your phone, and you could be reading and flipping through this, looking at the stuff. And this is all really good advice for painting, from my personal experience of painting paintings and sculptures and stuff like that. I would definitely go with this. Subscribe to the Warhammer official Warhammer TV channel, and go from there. It's always cheap. Keep in mind, when it comes to this, This versus Magic the Gathering, Warhammer is cheaper than Magic the Gathering. See, in the case of Warhammer, you can spend you can spend $200 or $300 in Warhammer, and you have a complete 2,000 point army, and depending on the faction, and you can use that army forever. I'm not joking. You can use that army forever. Sometimes the units are going to be weaker or stronger depending on the meta at the time. You can throw in $30, $50, $60 here and there to pick up a new figure or a new model. And then to zhuzh up your army. You know, something fun, new to paint, and you come up with a new combination strategy for your units. And you can play that, you can experiment, you can have fun, you buy a few more units, this and that. Everything you buy still has value. You can buy Liam and Russ tanks for Astra Militarum. Those tanks will still be good. 5, 10, 20 years from now. You bought them from several years ago. They're still good. You can keep using them forever in the current meta. That might the various units might rise and fall in value depending on your personal strategy and preference. In Magic the Gathering, there are so many formats that rotate out of value. It's not simply that the meta is like it shifts and it becomes weaker and then stronger and then weaker. I mean, in Magic the Gathering, it cycles out and you literally cannot use it all. At all. So, I have friends and people who make fun of Warhammer for being expensive, and they're Magic the Gathering fans, and they spend $200, $300, $400, $500, $600 for a single deck. They assemble all these cards. It's only good in one format. The whole thing that format rotates out. It now has to be repurposed into some other format or dismantled and used for other stuff. A new card comes out that completely obsoletes its 5 or 6 other cards they have in their deck, so they have to re-spend out that money. Magic the Gathering is really expensive. However, Magic the Gathering is you can have a bunch of cards and you can walk around with a few cubes, power cubes, and you have a set for this. Warhammer, the negative side of that is you have boxes of your army, and you have to open up your boxes and pull out all your units to play. So the advantage of Magic the Gathering is you have portability. Warhammer is cheaper. Everything you buy for Warhammer, save for the books. Save for the books like the old books. Unless you like collecting old books, those kind of go out of use. But as far as miniatures go, I assemble this guy. I can use him forever. I can use him 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 6, 10, 20. I could still keep using him. His points are going to, he is going to rise and fall in points. His attacks are going to get better or worse. Or stuff is going to fluctuate. But he's always there. I can always pull him off the shelf. Boop. And he's always ready for action. So, there you go. Thank you very much for watching this video. This is just a general overview video. I'm not going to do any reviews as far as Warhammer is concerned, because I am a noob when it comes to the assembling and playing Warhammer thing. I'm a fan of the lore, and I have painted stuff in the past, just not little miniatures. I never even painted my D&D miniatures before, which is kind of funny because I actually have I have numerous credits towards college art. And I never use them for anything. By the way, this is referred to as a sprue. These are all the little pieces. This is all generally snapped together. That's the base. That's the torso. So it's actually blue. So this all just comes apart and snaps together, and there's a little peg that goes into the arm here. You just apply a little fun. I have to get nipper. I have to get a new pair of nippers. I think I have a pair of nippers somewhere here. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you next time.